of all of the rookie quarterbacks from this year's heralded class that saw 6 of them drafted in the first 12. Now, 2 of them aren't playing. One's on the bench in Atlanta, and the other one is on injured reserve for the year in Minnesota. But and Drake May hasn't played yet. But for the 3 who are playing, there is yet to be a touchdown pass yet. This segment, a new one. Tell me why. Tell me why, Michael Holley. None of the rookie quarterbacks have thrown a touchdown pass yet.
Supporting cast, Mike Florio. All right, we talked about Caleb Williams. Watching that Sunday night game, he wasn't managing the game. He was on the run. Most of the game, he was just scrambling. He was just trying to survive. It's a wonder that they only lost by 6 points. They're really, everything they got, it felt like, oh, he survived that play. Oh, they're hanging on that entire game. So the supporting cast is not there yet, even though he does have DJ Moore. I'm going to say offensive line for Caleb Williams, and as you pointed out, running game. For Jaden Daniels, I'm going to put it more on him, that he is more comfortable running. He's an elite runner. We've seen that through 2 games. He really knows knows how to get where he wants to go. I don't think he is either refined as a passer yet or doesn't trust what he's seeing with his supporting cast. And with Bo Nix, just not enough. It's just not enough. The team's not good. Team's not good enough. And he's not good enough to overcome some of the problems that he's saddled with.
You know, when I framed this question of tell me why, I thought of Bo Nix's very literal answer to why he threw an interception in the end zone. He said, drop back, threw a pass, went to the other team. I mean, why haven't any of them thrown a touchdown? Because none of them have delivered a pass that was caught by a player who was either in the end zone or made it to the end zone after catching the pass. With Nix, can it be as simple as he's possibly faced the best 2 defenses he's going to face all year in Seattle and Pittsburgh? Could it be that simple? We don't know how great those defenses are going to be. It's possible. He's never going to see for the balance of the year defenses that good.
Yeah, Mike, but if you look at the Broncos, okay, tell me a difference maker on offense that anybody really has to be concerned about.
Cortland Sutton.
I think
so often.
Every so often. I just look at their team. They've got issues. Some of the issues came from Russell Wilson. We were talking about him earlier. Just the cap issues that they have, the dead money on the cap, some of the decisions that they've had to make. Some of the talent is not what Sean Payton wants it to be. He probably needs another round of drafting and free agency to get what he wants. So you kind of have a mismatch of some players that are Payton players, Sean Payton, not the GM, and some players who aren't. I think it's really tough for Nix, who I don't really, just to be honest, I'm not a huge Bo Nix fan. I know Sims is. I'm not a huge Bo Nix fan anyway, so I don't think he has enough to lift what's around him, and what's around him is not special.
It's been tough for the Broncos. It's a work in progress. At some point, they have to show some progress, or there may be some big changes there. We'll see how that plays out. Okay, tell me why there have been so few 300-plus yard passing performances and so many 100-plus yard rushing performances through the first 2 weeks of the season.
Because it's early. That's why it's early. Everybody hasn't figured this thing out yet, and you have some new situations. You have some new coaches and young quarterbacks, new head coaches, new offensive coordinators who have tried to make things work in the passing game. And so I think this is one of those defense ahead of the offense kind of situations. And Mike, with new coaches, a lot of new coaches, especially if they're younger. Now, in the case of Jim Harbaugh, doesn't really count because he's a guy who's had a system for a long time. But a lot of new coaches, they'll come in and they're a little more conservative. They want to establish the running game. You think about McDonald in Seattle. You think about Gerard Mayo in New England. These young guys, defensive-oriented guys who are not really trying to focus on the passing game. And I think injuries factor into it as well. You look at Malik Willis here. Yeah, you got no Jordan Love. LaFleur has to adjust and do something a little different because your game plan has changed because you have injuries. Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, same thing. Game plan has changed. You got to do something different.
Jason Garrett made a great point the other night in the podcast that we do during the Sunday night game. Good offenses get studied by everyone. They get studied by all the other defenses. They get studied by all the other offenses. And things get picked apart. And it does take time for offenses to get up to speed, for offensive line play to truly gel. That first month of the regular season is in many respects an extension of the preseason. The Patriots dealt with that under Bill Belichick. Once the 2011 CBA dramatically reduced the offseason prep time, the in-season practice intensity, there were so many fundamental things that you weren't able to really shore up, Michael, until you got to the games that counted it into that week in and week out flow of practice and playing. And you just hoped you could win the games that you played before your team was really ready to go. Now, we still haven't seen the numbers skewed the way they are, but you're right. It's just 2 weeks. It's a limited sample size. It will change in time.
Hey, Mike, you probably, if you went to every NFL city, I'll bet you every coach and general manager would all say the same thing. Everybody is looking for another offensive lineman. It's like, I wish if we had one more lineman, we'd be in good shape. And so these offenses, we focus on the skilled people and focus on the quarterback. A lot of these offenses are struggling or not not reaching their potential because the offensive line, every team feels like, yeah, if we just had a little bit more on the offensive line, we'd be in good shape. So prime positions in football, it's not just quarterbacks, not just wide receiver. Hey, teach your kids to be offensive linemen, and they can have long careers in football.
Great point, and you're right. They're always not enough. And the ones that this is a point that Sims makes, and I think it's one of the reasons why they look the other way on holding at times. They look the other way on the guy leaving a little bit early before the snap. The defensive linemen are so much better. The offensive linemen are overpowered, and it makes it hard to make an offense operate if your offensive line isn't able to do its job. Last one. Tell me why turning from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton is the right move for the Carolina Panthers.
I don't think anyone can do that. I don't think anyone can tell you that is the right move. Mike, if you play fantasy football, and a lot of people do, you always come across that guy, that fantasy football manager who you want to kick out of the league. The owner you want to kick out of the league. And David Tepper is the fantasy football guy. We'd all say, what? What exactly are you doing? This is not about Bryce Young. I refuse to say Bryce Young can't play until I see him somewhere else. Either David Tepper is no longer the owner, and I know that's not going to happen. So I need to see Bryce Young go to, like your Vikings. I'd like to see him do what Sam Darnold's doing right now. Go to a good offensive coordinator, a stable situation, and then see what he can do. Maybe he can't play. I don't know. But just a year ago, this was a valuable prospect, a rising prospect with a lot of potential, good head on his shoulders, all the things that people said about him. And now all of a sudden, after 18 games, he's a bust to the point where Andy Dalton, 37-year-old Andy Dalton, is coming in to replace him and going to do something better. No, I don't think that is the best situation for Carolina. I think it's just, unfortunately for Bryce Young, he found Carolina the worst ownership group, in my opinion, in football right now.
I'm glad you said that, Michael, because I want to run by you a theory that I've articulated on social media. We talked about it yesterday, and I wrote something about it this morning. You can't fire the owner. Jed York, the 49ers CEO, said that 7 years ago when his team was mired in dysfunction. And you can't. You're stuck with the owner. I feel bad for every fan base with a bad owner because I think the dysfunction that we see on the football field starts at the top and works its way down. You look at the teams that have ruined quarterbacks. The Jets have a long list of quarterbacks they've ruined. The Panthers are now the quarterback whimperers, not the quarterback whisperers, in ruining Bryce Young. I would not want to go there if I'm a quarterback coming into the draft, out of college, with my NIL money in the bank. I long for the day that the top quarterbacks, and I've suggested that they all come together this year, whoever they are, that loose group of 5 or 6 with a first-round possibility, they all come together and collectively say, hey, Panthers, don't draft any of us because none of us are coming there. Whoever you pick will sit out the whole year and live off of his NIL money, maybe make a little more NIL money along the way, and re-enter the draft in 2026. I would love to see that happen. That's the only way to send a message to a guy who can't be fired.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Carolina is that team to avoid now. I mean, David Tepper has made it obvious. It's almost comical. You can't make up some of the stuff that he's done in a short amount of time. Giving Matt Rule was the object of his desire. He gave Matt Rule a great contract, and then that wasn't good enough. And he goes to Steve Wilks as an interim, and he actually got success from Steve Wilks. They were competitive. They were 500 under Wilks, and then he didn't go to his last game. He didn't go to the last game of the year and moves on from Wilks. And then Frank Reich was his guy until he wasn't. And, he continues to bounce around with personnel. I just think he is that guy. Like some owners have the humility and security to say, hey, it's my team. I know everything that happens here. Nothing is going to happen without my knowledge. I'm good with it. I'll hire good people. I'll let them do their thing. He's got to be involved. And it's a shock, Mike, that he came from Pittsburgh. It's almost like he did the opposite of what the Rooneys have done for years. He's like the anti-Rooney. He's like, no, I don't want to do this. It hasn't worked here. I want to do something different, and I want to meddle. It's all on him. I'm with you 100%. If I were an agent, I would advise my client to at least a threat. The threat. If I got the number 1 pick and they have it, I'm going to tell you, hey, maybe I'll go back to school if that's an option for me. I want to be traded. You have to make that happen because the results speak for themselves. If you go there, you're not going to get a fair shake to show who you really are.
We've seen the meddling. We've seen the drink throwing. We saw the hat removal because, God forbid, there was a restaurant that had a sign out front that had something on it that the delicate billionaire didn't like, so he stopped the car and went in to talk to the manager. And the ultimate sign of disrespect, you mentioned Frank Reich. I'll never forget this. Deliberately mispronouncing the guy's last name. Nobody had ever called Frank Reich, who's been around football for 40 freaking years. Nobody ever called him Reich until David Tepper, the day he was announcing the decision to fire him. And I think he used it more than once. It's just, look, and I feel bad for Panthers fans. They're stuck. There's nothing they can do until he either changes or sells. That's it. And maybe you force him to change. If all the great quarterbacks coming into this year's draft would come together and say, we're not going to Carolina. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.